Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are back for another Red Death Mass stream. Come one, come all. Today we have two different stories from two different authors. One, The Radio Tower, the first story from 404 Anna Not Found. And then the second is a multi-part, over 25 parts, Devil's Den from Howler of the Hills? Howler of the Hills. And so we're going to start with the Radio Tower. I'm not sure. I know it's a multi-part too, but we're planning on reading at least a few parts of each story. Devil's Den, I was, maybe gonna go to part 3, maybe part 5, I'm not sure. But then I was gonna, not finish the story and just hope that people will go and finish it themselves. And support the author. That's the goal here, is we want people to go and upvote the stories and support the authors and show them some love. Whereas the Radio Tower, I'm not sure. I think it's maybe only 2 parts, so I'm thinking that it is a story that we can complete in a single stream. But yeah, I'm not seeing the link. Well, I guess I didn't look through all the comments. Sometimes you gotta just comment. No? Okay, so we're gonna go to their page real quick, because I do want to know how many parts the story is, but they've got some other stories. Of what do mice cry, and for whom the rats die? Interesting. An interesting title for sure. Looks like maybe they got some poetry. So I'm only seeing a part 1 from 2 months ago. So maybe it's just a continue. It's a story that is still maybe in the works, if they're gonna drop part 2 or not. But either way, that gives us plenty of time to then get into or read Devil's Den. So. Ugh. So that is the plan as of right now. Really quick at the beginning, I want to give a shout out to Anxietypilled. Here, I should have brought up their YouTube channel. Anxietypilled, they're on their 10th episode. They kind of do what I do. They read stories and give feedback, but it is like a podcast format more. There they are. I was like, why are they not coming up? I'm subscribed to them. But yeah, they just hit their 10th episode, and they've done a few contests and stuff, flash fiction contests. And yeah, it's a cool group of people they have over there. It's a cool community that they're building. They're kind of doing, I don't know, maybe not like a CREEPCAST thing, but they're essentially just a podcast that's made to highlight stories from their subreddit. And so they made the podcast specifically to just let people have a place to go and hear stories and from new and emerging authors, which I think is really cool. And so yeah, check out Anxietypilled. They've got a few like hosts and stuff too. And they kind of switch them out too, which is cool, because you get to hear different takes on different stories, and some contests or whatever, some of the hosts are contributing stories to them, and then other hosts are reading those stories and kind of commenting on them. So it's very cool. I think check them out, especially if you want to hear some really good stories, and just find some more like-minded authors and people. They seem to have a good group there. um and then the other person I wanted to shout out is Harold Sleeper, and we might even listen to this story today, if there's time. But Harold Sleeper, he's been a person in my chat, and uh contributor in terms of submit stories to me to check out and stuff. But he's got a YouTube channel now, and he's been posting pretty regularly. He's got I don't know, maybe like 10 videos at now out, ranging from just like 5 or 10 minutes to like 40 minutes, and he's reading, basically just narrating stories. But it's really cool. It's great to see. It looks like he's got Desperate Times for Desperate Meat, which is a story I've heard a lot about, or at least I've heard mentioned a lot. I don't know much about it, but a Star Was Born over Tobin, Pennsylvania sounds interesting. All I Can Do Is Burn by Bottom of the Barrel. So yeah, and he's just, I don't know how he chooses his stories, or if people submit to him, or what he's doing, but he's, yeah, got a new narration channel where he is, he read Reasons to Love Your Winchester by Harvey Bruce, which is a part of the Mr. Americana series, I believe. I listened to that video. It was really good. So yeah, just shout out to him, and basically any creators that are trying to help the authors in this community, and highlight authors, and really just share their stories, is kind of the point of a lot of these channels, is just to have another way for people to share their stories, because obviously we want people to go online and just read them, but most creepypastas got famous not because people read them. I mean, a lot of people did, but also, it was the channels, the narration channels, that really kind of blew up, the Mr. Creepypasta and all the others that made these stories kind of a lot more well known, and because people could just throw them on and listen to them. And so yeah, I think that's really cool to see newer creators doing that with smaller, maybe authors who have like less heat. you know Maybe they haven't been writing for quite as long, but doesn't mean stories don't deserve same same opportunities. And so it's really cool to see all these little channels popping up, and I see pretty constantly on the Tales from the Creep Reddit, I see people being like, I'm gonna stream, and I'm gonna read stories, or um I'm gonna give feedback. They're gonna maybe start a podcast and give feedback, or whatever. And I think that's great. I think the more the merrier. And I you know I hope that as people continue to do stuff like that, or highlight more stories, I hope that the authors in this community can kind of make the rounds on all these, whatever you want to call them, like Creepcast, Fan Orbit podcasts, or whatever they are. And these authors kind of make the rounds, and build build a fan base just that way. I think super cool. So yeah, I just, shout out. I'll keep trying to shout out more channels and stuff as I find them. And yeah. I hope to, collaborate more too with people. We'll see what we have in the works. There's always a lot going on. Life's always very busy, but I hope that in the future, whether it's Anxiety Build or Harold, I know I've said maybe we could have Harold on my stream. So yeah, it would just be really cool to get to collaborate with more of these creative writers, and people who are also just being creators as well, on YouTube and other places. Cause yeah, I've always said, I read stories, but, um, I never wanted to do it alone. I've always wanted to have people to theorize and bounce ideas off of with, and so it's very cool to see more and more people doing it in some capacity, whether it's just narration or whether it's a straight up like reaction feedback, in the moment, or it's like an edited podcast where they, have all the bells and whistles to like, select different stories and, maybe cut out certain things or do whatever they want to do. I think all are good, and all are just more ways for people to get their stories out there. So that's awesome. But yeah, I'll continue to keep shouting out channels and people as I find them. But without any more arduous ado, let us get into the radio tower. And this is from 404 Anna Not Found. And this story came to my attention from Boots or ckjm. So shout out to them for, promoting other people's stories and just sending it my way. And it was a little while ago that they sent it to me, but I'm just now finally getting around to it. So, I always encourage authors and just people in the Tales from the Creeps and other subreddits to, if you find a story that you're passionate about, whether you wrote it or not, you can always, put it on my radar or send me the link, and then I can reach out to the author, and hopefully they'll give me their permission to read it. But either way, read it on stream at least. But either way, it's just cool because yeah, I think that's another way that we can help stories from slipping through the cracks, is just by, the people that have read them to tell those of us other of us who are reading these stories and interested in them, because yeah, there's just so many. I was looking at my list today of stories that I still have permission to read that I haven't gotten to yet, and there's just so many. And then I'm thinking about all the newer authors that I've heard on these other podcasts whose stories I want to read, whether it's Anxiety-Pilled or, Harold's channel or stuff like that, that I'm like, ooh, I'd like to check out some of that author stuff. And yeah, there's just so much talent. So much talent. And yeah, it's good to have more people highlighting it, more channels and people that wanna check it out, because it's awesome. It's baffling. The more you drill down, the more you kind of see that, oh my god, like there are so many, creative people just like on the precipice of like, writing, whether it's a masterpiece or it's just something that's like just so entertaining. I think that can be there can be a lot of a lot of different ways that a story can be captivating, but I think it's important that we have more people to more places for those stories to be seen. You know what I mean? So, anyways, this is the radio tower, 404 and a not found. And shout out again to Boots for showing me the story. So, part one. My memory is a sieve. I'm not the first physician to notice this. Though in my case, the diagnosis is not a punchline. It's not a punchline or a coping mechanism, but a pathologically true fact. For most of my adult life, I have trusted in my recall of the way a man trusts his skeleton implicitly. To the point of forgetting it exists. Okay. That's I think I understand what they're saying, but also I find that kind of confusing because are they saying my memory is a sieve? I would think that would mean like leaky, right? Like it doesn't hold their memory shoddy, right? That's what I was taking. But then when they say they trust it implicitly, I'm thinking so maybe their memory used to be good, but then they say to the point of forgetting it exists. So I think they're saying that they just have lived a long time without having any recall or any good memory faculties. I think so. I'm a little confused on that. I'm sure it'll become clear the more we read on, but the metaphor. I'm not sure I was tracking it, but now I keep discovering new structural failures, hairline cracks, long stretches of bone, gone to sand. I write these sentences at a desk, which I must every evening reacquaint myself with. I am forced to relearn the patterns in the wood grain, the exact drag of the left drawer, the taste of my own coffee, which has always been bitter. I'm trying to be honest. So, really, what I'm getting from this first paragraph is unreliable narrator with memory issues, but also somebody who is a doctor, it sounds like. So, kind of interesting because maybe maybe we're gonna have some sort of like maybe not mad scientist, but like decaying scientist where they make some sort of a mistake or they made a mistake in the past that they're trying to fix or they're trying to figure it out, but they just can't quite remember. It's they lost the missing piece to their formula or whatever it is, sort of a thing. Which is a cool narrator for sure. It's a cool character. But yeah, I that's really what I think this sentence is trying to establish, or this paragraph is trying to establish. This opening paragraph. I am trying to be honest. In medical school, they teach you that writing is not for remembering, but for defending against forgetting. If you want to preserve the truth, you must carve it in the hardest substance at hand, the way a trauma surgeon learns to stitch through cartilage, not just for flesh. The following is my best attempt at such a record. So now we're getting the sense that this is because they know that they're a forgetful person. This is their attempt to preserve the truth through their eyes. This is their official record of the events as closely as they can remember or as they understood them at the time. And so, which again, I like, and I still am kind of getting the vibe that still might be unreliable. They say things like, I'm trying to be honest, but so we'll see, you know. But, yeah, very, very interesting. And I like it so far. I think the writing's good, and I think it evokes to me in this character that I have the sense that this person, that this is a story that where they have like regret, you know, from just the way they're like, the coffee is bitter and I have to remember the table. And even though that's what they're talking about for just sitting down to write this story, I don't know, it seems to me like it's almost begrudging. They're almost having to begrudgingly do it. They're writing it down because they don't want to forget, but they also don't necessarily want to remember this. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting. What's up, Rude Dude says, love a good memory loss story. Yeah, me too. I think it's such a fascinating issue to have, whether it's like straight up like Alzheimer's or that type of thing, or um you know, just like older age, or you know, the memory is such a just a funny thing, you know. It's something that's like so inherent, and kind of, I like the metaphor of it being like a skeleton, but you forget it exists, because it is true that like for so long you take your memory and your recall and stuff for granted, and then all of a sudden you reach like middle age or whatever in your life, and your memory starts to falter, or it's not as good as it used to be, and you know, your recall, like maybe you're trying to speak and you can't think of the words that you want to say, all these things, and it really just uh it can wear on a person, and it can kind of sneak up on you, so it's insidious in that way. Very cool and horrifying, you know, because it's something, it's a very real horror that we kind of all have to face in some way or another, whether it's through our loved ones and other people or ourselves, you know. Okay, and then yeah, and then in this next paragraph, see, so I was right about them being they don't want to forget, but it sounds like they don't want to remember either, because they say it will read, I suspect, as both confession and eulogy. So it's like they're confessing to something bad, they're also eulogizing, so somebody died, you know. Um yeah, I could see why they would want to forget this. If I have structured it well, it will serve as a sufficient account of those who survive me, even if I am not here to answer questions. The year was 1983. The place was Stanek. I almost read Staten, but the place was Stanek Island off the Maine coast. Population 812. Oh shit. I already am liking the setting. We got the 80s, an island off the coast of Maine with a population of 800. That already just seems like a great place for a horror story, not counting the dead. Which again, ominous, that makes me go, well, there's 812 people, not counting the dead. Well, how many dead are there, you know? Are there only 812 people alive on an island that used to have thousands? You know, we don't know. Not counting the dead. I was 15, a scholarship child, spending my third summer as a ward of the local program designed to keep us bright, unathletic children from drowning in the gene pool. The isolation suited me. My only complaints were the ones any person would have had. The insect load, the air so wet you could taste every decomposing leaf in it, and the persistent metronomic, okay, that's a good word, interesting word. The persistent metronomic blinking of the radio tower, visible from almost every square foot of the southern peninsula. I have to remind myself as I write this how normal it all seemed at the time. The recollection proper begins here. The five of us walked in loose, uneven formation along the gravel service path. Behind us, the settlement, 19 double wides, a general store, 2 churches so nearly identical that the locals told them apart by the species of dog tied outside, and a derelict community hall whose roof was kept from collapse only by the collective will of the people who insisted on holding events inside it. Ahead of us, the spruce line cut off direct view of the radio tower, but its shadow crawled over us whenever the breeze was strong enough to part the trees. The path was slick with rain from the night before, each step dislodging cold spray from the ferns and knee-high grass that bracketed the tire ruts. The story's set in Maine, but by the author's writing, it almost seems, British European to me. Just and now you know Jeff or Joff or um but just, yeah, I don't know, the way that they're set this up, it gives me very like I don't know, like Roger Ackroyd vibes, Agatha Christie almost, like there were the five of us, and these are the players, and I don't know if there's gonna be a murder or something like that, but you know so it's evoking a mystery, but it's also giving me it's giving older vibes, even older than the 80s, I would say. But it just might be the person's prose, but it's doing a great job of painting a picture, and it's even creepier when some of these old, like, East Coast towns or islands, in this case, it's like they are, because they were originally settled by, like, you know, English colonists hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It's like they almost do have this whatever tie to an older time than most of other parts of America, or if you set a story in Oklahoma or what, just it gives a more gothic sense, like with the trees parting to see this radio tower. um it almost seems like more like a lighthouse, or like a castle in the distance, sort of a thing. Uh Jeff, who claimed not to be cold, had the bluest lips of the bunch. He spat into the ditch every 6 or 7 paces, watching the trajectory as if expecting it to arc differently each time. Tony and Tommy flanked him, engaged in a running debate over which girl from the program would have the best chance of smuggling contraband onto the ferry at week's end. They were not careful about the volume of their discussion. Tony's voice was lower, but what it lacked in decibels, it made up for in percussive emphasis. Every syllable landed like a shovel in packed dirt. Tommy was all bounce and echo, repeating phrases and laughing before anyone else did. As if racing to the punchline. Mara and I walked in the lead, not so much together as simply ahead of the noise. She made no pretense of matching my stride, but somehow I never found myself more than a meter ahead of her. The rest of them would lose ground, fall behind, catch up, pass us, then slow again, obeying an erratic logic that I could never map. I liked Mara's gait. Economical, precise, unshowy. She walked the way she did everything else, as if each movement was a bet she had already calculated and was sure to win. She said little unless directly asked, which made the rest of us either nervous or desperate to fill the silence. Great character description. I would say it seems so simple when it's done well like this, but I would say after just listening to a story like there's something wrong on my property or whatever, where the guy's just like, yeah, I'm kind of a badass with the shaded past, but I'm not really going to tell you about it, and stuff like that. I think it's so important to point out when character, really what this whole part is doing is it's describing them walking to the radio tower or wherever they're going. But in describing how they walk, you think like it's just such a simple way of describing each character's personality. But it works so well, and it makes me feel like I know these people already and I care. And like I can relate to, if she's like the only girl in a group of boys, I can relate to like, she doesn't talk much. And she calculates everything. She's kind of ahead of the curve of the rest of these boys. And she said little unless directly asked, which made the rest of us either nervous or desperate to fill the silence. It's that thing of being a younger boy and like talking to a girl, or just really anyone, talking around your friends, and if your friends are quiet, you feeling like, because if you're a socially anxious person or whatever, you're feeling like you have to fill that silence. You know what I mean? It already, it does a good job of evoking like childhood friendship dynamics that's how you make your readers care about the characters in your story, is you remind them of times in their life when they maybe felt or acted similar, or if they didn't necessarily act similar, you make the characters simple to empathize with, rather than like in the property story, somebody's like, I'm pretty much an unfathomable badass who, with a shaded past, who I'm not really going to tell you anything about myself. You know what I mean? And it's like, no one can really relate to that. I guess maybe out there somewhere there's some like badass operators who are like, that's me. But those aren't the type of people that even read stories so very often. So it's not relatable at all. And this is very relatable. So I just think it's important to point out, not only because we just listened to a bad story in this week's Creepcast episode, but when it's kind of effortless like this, I think it's really important to point out. Because when it's done well, it just seems like, oh yeah, they're just describing people walking to a place, but really we're getting full breakdowns of the characters and how the hierarchy of the different characters. So we kind of have Mara and then our narrator that are walking at the front and walking at a set pace, that they're setting the pace, and then everyone else is kind of running to catch up or surpassing them and then slowing down, and then so it's like they're the leaders, followers. We already get so much from this. It's awesome. Great beginning. The forest on either side was set with an overripe, almost solvent odor of decomposing needles and resin. An undercurrent of salt. Yeah, because they're by the sea. Yeah. There was a small swamp to the left, its mirror surface broken by the cast off heads of cattails and the occasional drift of scum green duckweed. Gnat clouds bloomed and receded, replaced every few meters by a differently unpleasant insect presence. Every time I brushed a branch or reed, I half expected to come away marked, stung, or God knows what. My father would have described it as unspoiled, a term I had always found suspect, as though beauty was measured only by how untouched it could remain by human hands. The radio tower itself had no opinions. Its uppermost light blinked with the steady, indifferent pace of a heart on an EKG, 1 second on, 1 second off, a rhythm that became audible in your skull the longer you stared at it. The generator at its base was a more direct phenomenon. Even from 100 meters out, you could feel its base throb through the ground, a low, unbroken sound like the ocean held just outside your field of vision. When we rounded the final bend and the clearing opened up, the air seemed to thin, the ambient temperature dropping a full degree as we stepped onto the soaked, trampled grass at the base of the tower. God, look at that, said Jeff. It's like a fucking spaceship landed here. He was not wrong. The clearing was a deliberate space in the forest, an almost perfect oval, scrapped down to mineral dirt. The tower itself was newer than anything else on the island. Its steel lattice work, painted hazard red, its topmost section clearly taller than the tree line by a factor of 2 or 3. I had been out here twice before and found it equally impressive both times. The generator shed, a low concrete box with a slanted tin roof, was sunk several feet into the ground at the western edge of the clearing. From this angle, you could see both the guy wires that anchored the tower and the chain link fence that circumscribed the base, topped with a single line of slack barbed wire. The thing that caught the eye, though, was the splash of color at the foot of the tower's eastern leg. The human figure was not immediately apparent. At first, I thought someone had dumped a tarp or heavy coat. The color was wrong for the landscape. That my brain failed to the color was so wrong for the landscape that my brain failed to process it as a person. It was Tony who stopped first. Wait, he said, is that? We all halted. The rest of the group closed the gap between themselves and Mara and me, the energy of the walk dissipating in an awkward, silent shuffle. Henrik? Said Mara. Not a question. Henrik, said Mara. Not a question. He was face down in the moss and spruce needles, one boot half on. Oh, so maybe they do find a body. I'm thinking, so this already was giving very the body, Stephen King vibes of like older time, first core group of friends, walking to the tower for whatever reason. Like, I was already getting that, but now if they're about to discover a dead body or some sort of crime that occurred at the radio tower, first of all, let me just state that like I'm in, but also, this seems really cool and I love that. And I love the idea of kids stumbling into a mystery and sort of having to figure it out for themselves because they're just in such a small town where people are just going to maybe try to cover things up or the adults just aren't going to tell them the truth, sort of a thing. And so, yeah, I'm definitely in if it's a mystery like that, horror mystery. But also I'm in because I like I like the coming of age type story. Always good, always fun. Especially when it's really well written like this one is. He was face down in the moss and spruce needles, one boot half on, the heel of the other foot canted skyward in a way that seemed both unnatural and inevitable. His tool belt was twisted up under his torso, one leather pouch ruptured and spilling a handful of hex keys and washers into the dirt. The left arm was extended palm up, and a coil of heavy radio cable was looped 3 times around the wrist and forearm, terminating in a ragged, frayed end 2 feet from the body. His right hand was curled in a loosed fist next to his head, which rested in a shallow depression worn into the moss. There was a thin, dark wash of blood at his temple, not the arterial spurt I would later read about, but a slow, soaking leak, the kind that suggested a loss of consciousness rather than instant. For a long moment, nobody said anything. I crouched next to the body, balancing on my toes to avoid soaking my shoes. The first thing I did was check the neck for pulse. This was not medical training. My father had forbidden me to touch his patients, but I had watched him enough times to know where the carotid ran, how to press just hard enough to flatten the vessel without crushing it. Flatten it without crushing it. Huh? There was nothing. I looked at the color of the skin, the slackness of the jaw. I had never seen a dead person, but I had seen photos. This was not like the photos. This was smaller somehow. Is he? Tommy began. I straightened, wiping my hands on my jeans before I realized how pointless that was. Blood had already dried on my fingers. He's dead, I said. Jeff tried to make a joke, a reflex born of discomfort, but the words failed him. Instead, he let out a single high-pitched laugh and then clapped a hand over his mouth. Tony took a slow step backward. Mara knelt beside me and examined the cable, tracing the length from the forearm to the ragged end, then back to the base of the tower. Her face was careful, a precision instrument set to record without judgment. I admired her for that. Was it an accident? Tommy asked, as if the logic of it might redeem the scene. Did he fall? I looked up at the tower at the regular intervals of crossbars, the clean lines of the guy wires. The base of the tower was dry, the only disturbance in the clearing patch where Henrik lay. Maybe, I pondered, but I don't think so. The generator continued, indifferent to the drama at its threshold. We stood there, 5 teenagers and a dead man, surrounded by the unbroken forest, the generator's low throb, and the tower's blinking red, the only witnesses. I think we should go back, Mara said. Her voice was even, but she kept her hand close to her face as she stood. Nobody disagreed. We left Henrik as we had found him, tableau arranged for whatever adult would next wander through. I did not look back until we had entered the tree line, and even then I was not certain what I was hoping to see. I remember this with such clarity it sometimes feels like an implanted memory, a film I have watched too many times and now confuse with my own history. But I was there, and so were the others, and what happened next is simply a reminder or a remainder. A remainder of the story, but would irrevocably change all of our lives. The walk back through the forest is not a walk. We move in a kind of single file disorder, speed fluctuating between a forced march and something not quite a jog. Nobody wants to be the first to call it running, and nobody lags so far behind that the group splits. But there is a current underfoot. We are all carried by it. I lead not because I am particularly brave or even especially sure of where I am going, but because I have the highest forward velocity and the others are content to draft behind it. Mara's 2 steps behind, her breathing measured and regular. She has not once looked over her shoulder since we left the clearing. I keep glancing sideways, expecting to see her eyes scanning between the trees, but she is fixed entirely on the route ahead. If she is afraid, she is storing it for later. The forest is denser now. Every sound is crisp to the point of violence. I like that. I like that line a lot. I mean, there's a lot of these lines that I like. Like I've said, the writing's very good, but I'm so wrapped up in it that I don't want to stop to kind of comment on it. But like every sound is crisp to the point of violence. It just that sort of a line is a way of, you know, being like a branch snapped underfoot and like it makes everyone kind of jolt or, but without exactly saying that, it just describes the sound as being crisp to the point of violence. It's just yeah, it's very Very good. The collapse of a dead branch underfoot, the wet slide of a boot on stone, rasp of Tommy's jacket as he tries to keep up while avoiding the brambles. Behind us, the tower's red pulse is still visible at intervals, the metronome counting down to nothing in particular. After 5 minutes, the terrain flattens and the path widens. The houses of the settlement appear suddenly, as if extruded from the earth while we were gone. I can see the dock, the strip of gravel that passes for Main Street, and the general store's makeshift banner advertising some brand of potato chips I had never seen outside New England. The ferry is at anchor, a pale hulk looming at the far end of the cove, and the smell of diesel competes with the usual brine. The adults are arranged in their standard morning configurations. 4 men at the far dock, each with a crab trap in a different state of despair. Miss Tierney, and her assistant at the store's outdoor freezer restocking bags of ice. A cluster of seniors on the sunward side of the community hall porch playing some variant of cards that seems more about argument than points. We cross the open ground, ignoring the usual markers. No detours to the convenience store for gum or to the picnic benches for a drink of water. The others let me keep the lead as we approach the first adult. Roy Collins is the one I choose to speak to. I have always liked him, which is rare for me. He has the hands of a man who could break you in two, but the voice of a patient, slightly amused uncle. He sees us coming and raises an eyebrow, but does not set down the crab trap he is relining. Something up? He asks. There is a strong undertow of expectation in the question, as if he has already predicted a handful of possible answers and is preloading his responses. There's a body at the base of the radio tower, I say, and it's Henrik. I deliver this in the same tone my father used when listing patient symptoms over the phone, careful not to dramatize, letting the words do the work. Collins blinks once, slowly, for a split second. He is a blank page, the words arranging themselves in a sequence I can almost see behind his eyes. Then he nods, twice, a slow, deliberate motion that does not travel above his shoulders. Henrik? Huh? Where exactly? At the base, I repeat. Near the east support. He's face down. There's blood at his temple. Collins processes this with a small pursing of the lips. He does not look at the other men who are now openly watching us. Well, he smacks his lips together. We'll have a look then. He turns back to the crab trap, his hands resuming their task as if I had told him nothing more consequential than discovering a pothole. I stand there waiting for an acknowledgement to deepen or evolve, but he offers only a vague nod in the direction of the forest. Mara tugs gently on my sleeve. It is the first time she has initiated contact all morning. Let's try the store, she says, barely above a whisper. I nod, and we walk away. Behind us, the only sign of change in Colin's behavior is that he takes a second longer pause before threading the next section of rope through the trap. I look back at him once and see him staring at the water, mouth slightly open. At the store, Mrs. Tierney is supervising her assistant, a teenage girl I do not know by name, as they restock a wire rack with sun chips and soda. She is old enough that her hair no longer looks gray, but has begun to approximate the color of the steel door behind her. I admire her ability to monitor multiple things at once. Her eyes flick from the truck to the assistant's hands, to us at the register and back again in an endless, efficient cycle. We found we found Henrik at the radio tower, I say, again opting for directness over pleasantry. He's dead, I think. Someone might have hurt him. Miss Tierney's gaze stops cycling for the duration of one breath, then resumes at its usual clip. These things have a way of working themselves out, she slurs, and I note the phrase because it's not one I have ever heard from her before. She's always favored specifics. Let me call Donnie. He'll know what to do. Or, we should get some ice on that, dear. I wait for her to break character, but she simply nods, accepts a stack of flattened chip bags from her assistant, and moves to the next chore. Tony is scowling now, his arms folded across his chest, posture of someone who has spent a childhood being underestimated and resents every minute of it. He opens his mouth to say something to Mrs. Tierney, then thinks better of it and mutters underneath his breath, nobody gives a shit. We can try the ferry, Mara offers, as if she is mapping out a diagnostic algorithm, and we are only at step 2. On the way down to the dock, Jeff stops me with a light tap on the shoulder. This is weird, right? He asks. And for once, his tone is completely stripped of irony. Like, this isn't just me. It's not just you, I reply. See, already, I'm interested because I'm like, small town. So immediately before we even ever got to there's a body at the radio tower or anything, I'm like, small town, there's going to be some sort of a cult, or there's going to be some sort of like, even if it's not a cult, it's like the whole town is in on some sort of a conspiracy. And immediately they find the body, which we don't even know why they were going to the tower, but they find the body, they find Henrik's body, and then they're going to tell people. And they've immediately gotten 2 odd things. He's like, the one guy is like, well, let's have a look, see. We'll have a look then. But he keeps relining his crab trap or whatever. Then they go to the lady at the store who's such a like perfectionist and a multitasker, and she just like, well, these things have a way of working themselves out. And it's like, you know, you're always the first one to do things or to tell somebody what to do. And now yeah, their reactions are not on, they're very unsettling, but this is giving like, it's giving series of unfortunate events. Like, you know, the kids know that something's wrong, or they know that, you know, Count Olaf's there, but all the adults just kind of are dismissing them. So it's giving that. But then the fact that they say that there's a dead body in there, or that they think he's hurt, because he said something different. He said he's dead. I think someone might have hurt him. He says to her, and she says, these things have a way of working themselves out. Like it's happened before. And so Mrs. Tierney's whatever response is far more unsettling. To me, what's the most unsettling thing that the other guy did is he said, well, let's have a look, or, you know, but then he just went back to doing his trap and staring out at the ocean. And so I'm like, this is crazy. And so yeah, it's giving me all those vibes of the children are gonna have to be the ones to get to the bottom of this, or the teenagers, and the rest of the town is in on it in some sort of a way, or they're used to things like this happening, and it's just kind of agreed that nobody's gonna make any waves or really say anything. And yeah, it's a very fun dynamic for this type of story. I think the from the setting and the way the story began, again, it was somewhat expected, but at the same time, like, that is what horror stories are supposed to do. It's like, I think it was in the CREEPCAST episode where they were talking about the Japanese horror stories, but they're like, there's something so comforting about the story being like, let me tell you exactly what's going to happen, with it like telling you what the legend is at the start. And then it's like, and then that's exactly what happened. In a similar way, this story was like a group of, smart, but, maybe a little rambunctious, or a little, problem stirring teenagers stumble across a body, and then when they go to tell people in the town about it, everyone dismisses them, so I kind of saw that coming as soon as there was a body, but also I'm not mad at it. I'm glad that the story's playing out this way. It's piquing my interest and expectations more, because now I'm just like, rather than be like, oh, it's another thing where the whole town's in on it or whatever, I want to know what the town is in on. Like, it's still leaving enough air of mystery to me, that I want to know why Henrik dying is not something that's alarming to at least the first two people they've talked to, and that's the thing, they're kids too, or they're teenagers, so it's like, even if they're like, well, if he's dead, there's nothing we can do about it now, it's like, there still are protocols for these type of things. You need a doctor out there to pronounce him dead. The kid whose the dad is a doctor is not usually enough to pronounce, somebody dead. So you need somebody out there to say for sure that he's dead, and then you need some sort of police. Like, this isn't a sort of just well, we'll deal with it when we have time sort of a thing. Like, if it was like roadkill or something, or they said like, oh, we think we found a dead animal out by the tower, and then turns out later it's actually a human body, I could understand adults being dismissive, but this is just very ominous. It's not just you, I reply. He nods, relieved. And we know from what our narrator said is that this changed our lives, so we do kind of get the sense that yeah, obviously it would affect anyone to find a dead body, but it's like, the fact that they're the ones who found it and are trying to like call alarm to it and report it, I think is going to, and the fact of not being believed, that, or not being, maybe not being believed, but not being taken seriously, that alone is already traumatic for you as a child or a teenager. Like, you see something traumatic, you go to tell an adult, and there's not an instant movement to help you, or to, whatever. That's gotta, yeah, So that's one way that I already think, oh, this could change their lives forever. But now I'm wondering, like, how else is it going to change each of them? We know our narrator went on to become a doctor. We know that, but then because he talks about being a physician and his dad being a physician, so we can expect that, like, it's not like these kids are getting blamed and going to prison, but something about what they uncover is going to, change them. He nods, relieved. Tommy is walking 10 feet ahead, his head on a swivel, as though expecting someone to leap out from behind a barrel and offer a plausible explanation for everything. I'm struck by how young he looks in this light. The normal bravado of his posture erased by the gravity of what we have seen. Aldous Peck is the ferry operator, and in my life to that point, I had never seen him do anything that is not directly related to the ferry. He is always in motion, loading, unloading, checking manifests, refueling, making complicated notes on a clipboard. Today, he is standing by the edge of the water, staring at a yellow float that bobs 20 yards out. His uniform is a green t-shirt with the name of the ferry stenciled across his chest, across the chest. The letters faded almost to invisibility. We found a body up at the tower. I'm kind of doing it in a joking manner, but I feel like at this point of going to two adults and not really being taken seriously, and the fact that every time this kid had enough, or this teenager had enough foresight to be like, I'm gonna deliver this in a monotone, like I'm not gonna come in seeming all emotional and rushed. I'm gonna try to, I'm gonna try to get the information across in a simple, direct manner. For him to have that much, like, I don't know, like maturity or foresight to like do that, and then to not be believed, I feel like at this point, with the third time's the charm. I think he literally at this point is gonna have to be almost robotic. Like, we found a body up at the tower, like, we found a body up at the tower. I repeat again, as soon as they are within earshot. Henrik's dead. Peck nods, but does not turn away from the float. How does he nod? How do people not, like, they must just already all know that Henrik's dead, or everyone in town hates Henrik. That could be those are really the only two plausible options, because at this point it's like the whole idea of, unless he nods and then he's like, wait, what did you say? Like, I could understand having a miss, like thinking, you know, not taking the gravity of it, but it seems like everyone already knows and the kids are just the last people to know. I've only got 2 round trip slots open this week, he states, as if the dead man's presence might constitute a reservation. Can you wait till Thursday? I am so startled by the non sequitur that I say nothing for a full 5 seconds. Mara recovers first. We just thought you'd want to know, she says accusingly. Peck shrugs. Probably the generator again. Just kept going out. No warning. There's a brief silence. The kind that only happens when a conversation is already over, but the participants have not yet agreed to walk away. Thanks. Mara doesn't quite know how to end the conversation, and we walk back up the dock. On the way, we pass Collins again. He is alone now, the other men gone, and he is threading rope through his hands with the same absent motion as before. If not for a slight change in the lighting, I would swear he had not moved. 5 of us gather near the dock entrance, not sure what to do next. Tony is vibrating with anger, fist clenched at his side. We should drag someone up there, he mutters. Make them look at it. Nobody's going to do anything, barks Jeff. He sat down on the lip of the seawall, staring at the horizon with the blackness of a person on day 3 of a fever. They already know, they just don't care. Tommy is still watching the community hall, as if expecting an adult to emerge and set things right. His face is blank, but his hands are shaking slightly. Mara looks at me. She does not ask a question, but I feel compelled to answer anyway. I think something's wrong with them, say. Not just today. It's like I search for the word, but all the ones I can find are medical and none fit. Broken, says Mara. I nod. Yeah, broken. Take out my notebook. My father always carried a field notes log in his pocket, and it had always seemed a dignified habit, so I adopted it, even though I rarely had the occasion to record anything outside of school assignments or interesting animal sightings. I turned to a clean page and with a borrowed pencil stub write, something on this island is wrong. There is a long, shared silence. The others stand in a rough circle, not looking at each other, not looking at me. Above us, the radio tower's warning light is visible through the gap in the trees, still blinking at its perfect, inhuman interval. The community hall seems less a building than an assertion of collective memory. It exists at the edge of the settlement, shingled with a local tradition that says if you hold enough birthday parties and bake sales under a given roof, the structure will be immune to both time and weather. This is not true, but the lie is serviceable. The place smells of history that has soaked into its fibers. The double doors stutter on their hinges as we file in. There are 3 phones in the hall, which is exactly 2 more than any other building on the island. One is an ancient black wall mount, the kind with a cord so coiled it looks like a fossilized intestine. The second is a squat gray tabletop model with a rotary dial scarred by the fingernails of every person who has ever tried to call in a weather warning before the storm cut power. The third is new, a push-button unit with plastic so white it repels fingerprints. Mara goes first, as always. She crosses the wood plank in a line so straight I can feel the effort in each step. She lifts the wall phone and presses the receiver to her ear, then holds it there, unmoving, her jaw set in a line. So controlled I want to reach over and prod her just to see if she would react. Well, says Jeff. After a time, Mara keeps the receiver to her ear, but turns to look at him. The angle of her head asking if he expects anything different than the obvious. Static, she states, nothing else. She does not hang up. She covers the mouthpiece with one hand and closes her eyes, as if some hidden frequency will emerge if she simply outlasts the silence. After 10 seconds, she puts the receiver back, the cradle accepting it with a soft click. I prefer verification. I move to the gray tabletop phone, spin the rotary through a test number, and count the audible gaps as the dial resets. The plastic is cold and slightly greasy against my skin. I do not expect a dial tone, but I check for one anyways, because the gesture is ritual. When the absence repeats, I place the receiver on the table and mentally catalog the likely failure points. Circuit box, trunk line, tower base, operator switchboard. Tommy kneels beside me. He is careful to avoid making eye contact, instead focusing on the phone as if by proximity he can force the machinery to life. Maybe the lines are just overloaded, he suggests. That happens. Storms do it all the time. There wasn't a storm last night, I reminded him, but gently. And somebody cut them, says Tony. His voice is flat, factual, the way a person might point out a missing limb. He offers the statement, leaving it to float in the astringent air. Jeff grunts, moves to the third phone, stabs at the keypad, his thumb heavy on the plastic, dialing nothing at all. What's the plan now? He asks. I mean, we can't call out. Are there walkies? Does anyone have CB? Mara shrugged. Henrik was the only one who ran the broad. If he's gone, he is gone, I say, unable to stop myself. Then the relay's down for good. Ah, so now they're all kind of stuck. It's kind of a locked in scenario, but on an island. That's fun. I didn't think it would kind of elevate to that fast, but now it's not so much that they're, it's the whole like locked in and a storm. It's like the whole classic murder mystery thing of we're locked in and there's a house, um, you know, uh, and nobody can leave, but there's a murderer loose and one or two people have already died, so it's that same sense, but instead it's a small cut off island with only a ferry to get them off, which seems like it I don't know, maybe doesn't take a lot of trips anyways. And now all the phone lines are down, and then the only guy with the CB radio is the guy who was at the radio tower who was killed, Henrik. So this is not good. This is not good. I am wondering. It seems like our main character, it's like he idolizes his father as being a doctor and stuff, and he practices it, but his father's not with him on the island. From what he becomes a ward on this island is like part of it, but I'm like, who is these children's supervisors on this island? Who is responsible for them? And go to them, but maybe they don't trust that person. So then I'm like, there's no community. There's a community center that they're in with the phones, but there's no police on this island. There's no anything. So, I mean, it's kind of just a lawless island in Maine then, even if it didn't seem that way. And the fact that everyone's broken and can't even come to comprehend that, like, oh, this is a serious situation, and at the very least, somebody should go get the body. You know what I mean? Like they should, you know, they should mark off the crime scene. They should do something, Yeah, God, it's creepy. It's just creepy that these children are coming to all these realizations that now they're stuck, and now uh nobody cares, and they might be stuck on this island with a murder of only 800 people, and they've already told 3 different people. And on an island like this, you have to imagine gossip uh travels quicker than the fucking raindrops, and so yeah, you have to imagine that this murderer probably knows that they know if indeed Henrik was murdered, you know? Tony kicks at the floor, his boot scraping a bright new scar into the wood. We could try the VHF Direct, he says, not to anyone in particular. Tommy laughs, but the sound is damp and wavering. What are you going to do, Tony? Build a radio from junk in the kitchen? If you have line of sight and enough wattage, Tony begins, but Mara cuts him off. You heard what the fairy guy said. Nobody's coming until Thursday at best. That's 5 days, says Jeff. He sits on the edge of a folding table, the metal groaning under his weight. You know what can happen in 5 days? Everything, I say. And the word tastes sour. God, so haunting. So just, ugh. This is great though. I'm loving the classic mystery. I'm wondering if there is going to be any supernatural setup. I have to imagine that because they were going out to the radio tower that they had some sort of a relationship with Henrik, so I wonder if Henrik was teaching them about the radio tower, and because of that I'm wondering, can they use all their combined knowledge to maybe get an SOS out or something from the radio tower? Because that's what I'm thinking, is that eventually, you know, they've tried to alert people. No one gives a fuck. They're going to have to get either SOS out or, but they're going to have to go back to the tower is what I think. And then, you know, like maybe the body's going to be gone. We don't know, right? But, because the story's called, you know, the radio tower, it's like I have to imagine that that's going to be maybe where they make their sort of final stand or, you know, something. But this is great. I'm fully like in on the mystery. I think on horror subreddits and on the creepypasta, you know, CREEPCAST lore, or not even lore, but just on their body of stories that they've read, I think that classic mysteries are like super underrated and not really seen as like even horror per se, when to me I'm like, there's nothing scarier in my or maybe not nothing, but scary monsters and all that stuff super cool, you know, Lovecraftian entities super cool. But also, like, the whole idea of being stuck on an island with only 800 people who all don't seem to give a fuck that a guy just died or was murdered. Like, that's horrifying. To me, that's just as horrifying. You know, I guess Baraska kind of had that element of, like, a mystery that they finally uncovered, and it was the town's sins, you know? And in this, we kind of have a similar thing where the town is seeming to be complicit. But I think like more stories just need to use that very simple structure of mystery we characters solve, you know? And that's all you really need. And you don't need, like with the story of I'm an officer who keeps getting called to the same house, you don't need the bad guy to give you a fucking exposition dump at the end. Just have your characters through their own agency and wits solve the case, even if it turns out, oh, he did just fall, or even if it turns out, oh, the killer's dead or he's off the island, you know, he fled. Like, it still is so satisfying for me as a reader to get a mystery, see who my characters are in terms of the people who want to right this wrong or solve this mystery, and then just take me through that steps. That is such a great, simple formula that horror does to some extent. Like usually, yes, there's a monster and people want to find out why the monster, how the monster came to be or what. But so often in an effort to be the most horrifying a story can be, it's like they don't want to solve the mystery, or it's like they're like, well, if we tell the audience, it's not going to be as creepy as what they could come up with themselves. And so for that reason, we can't really we can't solve the mystery. But I'm like, I want more mysteries solved, especially in horror. I think horror, I think it lives in all of the unknowing before, and that's why I think that this is only a part one, so I don't think we're going to get a mystery solved in this, but the setup is just so, to me, satisfying and good that I'm just like, give me more stories where we've got a group of characters, or just one or two characters that stumble onto a mystery and they have to solve it, and that's all I want. So many stories to me are my favorite, that are just basic stories like that. A who done it. A draft moves through the hall. It snakes in via the cracks around the window panes, winding its way around our ankle. The windows here are so thin they magnify the blinking red of the radio tower outside, each pulse staining the floor with a faint blood-colored after image. God, I love that imagery. So good. If you stare at it long enough, the rhythm sets your heart rate. I open the circuit box near the storage closet, check the fuses, flip the main. Nothing changes. Mara paces the room in a deliberate square, each lap methodical, although she is counting perimeter for an eventual escape. Jeff watches her, his eyes following the route, but his mind is already elsewhere. We could try the Jensen house, Tommy. They have a ham radio set up. The old guy, Mr. Jensen, he used to patch through to the mainland during lobster season. They're probably home, hopes Tony, but it doesn't sound like hope. Mara stops pacing. Let's just say it out loud, he says. We're cut off. We're stuck here until the next scheduled boat, or until somebody fixes the relay at the tower. Or until somebody else dies, says Jeff, and his voice comes out thin, like he is already practicing the retelling. Tommy slides down to the floor, his back against the wall, and stares up at the ceiling. You think they'll send somebody when they notice? If the lines are dead, how would they notice? Shouts Mara. Henrik handled the logs. The only way anyone would even know is if there's no check in. And even then, you think anybody on the mainland is waiting to hear from us? Tony shrugs again, this time more ambiguous. The room feels smaller now. The humidity of breath and adolescent sweat, the sense of being watched by the inventory of unclaimed trophies and warped portrait photos that line the walls. I drift to a window and peer out. There is no visible movement of anyone. The village looks suddenly uninhabited. A model or diorama abandoned by the child who built it. Okay, I say. Let's review what we know. Four faces turn to me, waiting. 1. Henrik is dead. Possibly murdered, though nobody is calling it that. 2. The adults are, I struggle for a word, then settle for non responsive. 3. The phones are out and the tower and the tower is functioning maybe, but unmanned. 4. We have no way to get ourselves off the island to the mainland for help. Mara holds a hand, ticking off points as if checking them for fault. We're missing something, says Jeff. Some piece, because this doesn't make sense. Not in any real world way. Sometimes things don't make sense, says Tommy. I looked at each of them in turn. We need a plan, I say. And this time it's not a suggestion. Mara nods. The motion is small but decisive. I've always hated my father's living room. The entire design is an argument against comfort. No throws or pillows, all furniture arranged to maximize airflow rather than human use. And a persistent odor of ozone from the ancient humidifier he insisted on running year-round. My father was a man who believed in prophylactic effect of minor suffering. My father was a man who believed in prophylactic effect. Okay. Of prophylactic effect of minor suffering. He applied this philosophy to medicine, child rearing, and choice of his sofa. The couch cushions are undisturbed, untouched by any human since the last time he rose from them. I have to remind myself that he is not about to walk in from the kitchen, mug of black coffee in one hand, and a question about my performance in school poised on his tongue. The group clusters at the threshold, uncertain if they are allowed to cross the boundary into my domestic history. I wave them in. Mara is first, as usual, scanning the room with a kind of predatory caution. So I think his dad is dead. I think our main character's dad is dead from that last bit. I also don't understand this whole prophylactic effect of minor suffering. I'm not sure if I want to understand. Isn't a prophylactic like a condom or a... I guess I can Google it. I just don't know if I want to know. And then also, uh, the fact that he says my father's home, not my home or our home. Okay, infection or harm before it essentially means preventative. In the preventative, okay. So he basically believed in making his living room have suffering, is what I'm getting by this. I wave them in. Mara is first, as usual, scanning the room with a kind of predatory caution. Tommy and Tony follow in a pair, their steps landing out of sync, then converging as they stake out the separate corners. Jeff lingers at the threshold until I gesture again, then closes the door behind him with an audible click. The house is silent except for periodic tick of the kitchen clock and the low ultrasonic whine of the fridge cycling on and off. On the end table is a medical journal, open to an article on the epidemiology of emerging viral encephalopathy. I slide it to the center of the table with a practice flick. The article is heavy on electron micrographs and short on answers. A perfect encapsulation of my father's. So, drawls Jeff, what's the next move? Compare notes, I reply. We see what fits. Tony grunts, but otherwise says nothing. I begin with Miss Harper, the morning of the day before. I recount her standing at the dock, muttering to herself. The locals avoided her with theatrical nonchalance, the way you might step around a fresh oil stain in the driveway. Each detour a little wider than the last. Mara nods along, unsmiling. She has already heard this, but she lets me retell it for the sake of the others. Then Mr. Jensen, up at dawn, drilling a neat row of holes into the hull of his own lobster boat. When I asked why, he looked straight at me and said, "To let the air out." Then he returned to work, as if my question had never been asked. Maybe he finally cracked, laughs Tommy. The guy's been losing it for years. Possibly, I say, but it doesn't explain the rest. I pause, waiting to see if anyone will contribute. Mara picks up the thread. Mrs. Tierney, she adds, I watched her take inventory at the store. She recited the numbers backwards, every item, then locked the freezer and put the keys in the slot for outgoing mail. When I asked if she was okay, she said, I'm keeping score. Tony shrugged, his default gesture for all information. Jeff offers a data point. Collins at the dock. I saw him open the same crab trap 5 times in a row, each time acting surprised by what was inside. I asked if he needed help, and he told me to fuck off, which I guess is normal, but the rest isn't. The evidence accrues, each anecdote more inexplicable than the last. None of the adults seem capable of acknowledging a deviation in anyone's behavior, least of all their own. I rise and move to the bookshelf. The spines are a uniform brown, the dust jacket color leached out by sunlight over years. I pulled down my father's favorite text, Neurovirology, 3rd edition, and opened it to a flag section on viral-induced cognitive dysfunction, Chapter 12, encephalopathies, progressive and acute. I set the book on my knees and traced the diagram with my index finger. Virus enters host, crosses blood-brain barrier, interrupts normal neural transmission, leads to abnormal behaviors, and eventually systemic collapse. The annotations in my father's handwriting are precise and joyless. Tommy leans over my shoulder. You think it's contagious? He breathed. His breath is loaded with the acetone tang of sweat and whatever snack food he had hoarded in his pockets. Everything is contagious, I say, but only Mira hears it, and she looks at me like I have confirmed her worst suspicion. The cold kettle on the stove is an artifact of the morning, a relic left untouched as the rest of the house drifted toward entropy. I want to boil water for everyone, as if tea could stave off the thing that is crawling through the community's collective nervous system, but I don't know if that would help or just further the illusion that normalcy is achievable. What about us? Asked Tommy, and this time his voice is almost childlike. How do we know we're not? He does not finish the sentence, and nobody tries to supply the words for him. Tony is staring at the bookshelf. Jeff sits on the arm of the couch, fidgeting with buttons on the remote. Each click, another layer of static added to the background. Mara moves closer. She studies the diagram, then flips back several pages, scanning each one with a finger that moves at a pace both deliberate and slightly patient. We need a hypothesis, she says, not just anecdotes. I agree, I say, and this time my voice is steadier. I do have to say, like, they're teenagers. They do seem a little. I think I really like the inclusion of like Tommy and Tony and them being like, he just told me to fuck off and stuff because they sound like kids. Really, Mara and our narrator, for the most part, don't. And I think that that's fine. I think there are some kids who, like, their parents were aloof or estranged. Their parents, they've kind of taken care of themselves their whole life. So that's just what I'm assuming these kids, that's kind of where Mara and our narrator, that's kind of why they're so alike. But I just, I don't know, the fact that they are being so scientific about this and immediately being like, oh, there's a virus that's making them, and they're like, encephalopathies and neuroviruses, and that the fact that they're getting like, I could understand like them theorizing basically the same thing, but the fact that they're like reading the science book and getting so scientific about it, I like it. I think it's cool for the story, but it also is taking me out of the fact that they're teenagers a little bit. And so I would like to see maybe more at this part, or maybe throughout the story later. I would like to see more aspects of them just being teenagers, or of like Tony or Tommy or Jeff or these people being like, a virus didn't push, whatever, Henrik off the tower, kind of bringing up the idea that, like, okay, yes, all the town has maybe been poisoned, or maybe been has this virus that's like make them gone brain dead, but at the same time, like, that doesn't answer the question of why are there no phone lines working? Why are there, because I feel like, in addition to being this super duper analytical and comparing notes, I do think like there needs to be some like common sense, like, I don't know, like, we need to protect ourselves, or just even like common sense fear of like the unknown, to where rather than being like, because clearly Mara and our narrator are kind of like the more Sherlock Holmes, like, where they're like, we need a hypothesis and do your research and all that stuff. But I do think there's something to be said for, like, I don't know, just still being kids, them still having like, should be worrying about the things kids worry about, where they're like, am I ever going to see my mom again, or just something, I don't know. It's not even really a note cuz I'm still enjoying the story so much, but I do think like it's just kind of funny that not only is the writing, well, the writing is a grown man who's writing it all with hindsight from back, from what he remembers, but I do kind of think that, like, yeah, I don't know, like, it makes them seem not like kids, kind of, to be like, we need a hypothesis, not just anecdotes. Like, that to me, especially because we don't know, like, okay, all these kids are super smart. Like, maybe they're all part of this ward, and why they're on this island or whatever is because they're like all geniuses or something. Maybe something like that could kind of denote that. But yeah, it's just, I think it's worth mentioning at this point that it's fine if some of the characters are less childlike than others, but it seems like Mara and our narrator are really like almost too robotic and not even human almost. I agree, I say, and this time my voice is steadier. I open my notebook, the one I had used at the dock, and draw a table with 2 columns, affected and unaffected. The first column fills quickly. Henrik dead, Mrs. Harper, Mr. Jensen, Collins, Miss Tierney, all exhibiting aberrant behavior. In the unaffected column, the only names are the 5 of us and perhaps the store clerk girl whose name I still don't know. Tony finally speaks. Maybe it's the water. I consider this. The island's water table is shallow, and after a heavy rain, the wells often overflow. Or the air, says Jeff, like spores or mold. Nobody's coughing, I point out, but he is not wrong to suggest inhalation as a vector. See, it's lines like that where I'm like, are they scientists or are they teenagers? I don't know. Maybe they're both, but it started with a boat, says Mara, not as a question. Or when it rained the other night, says Tommy. Or it's in the soil, I say, and something just triggered the acute phase. We stare at each other for a full minute, the silence as dense as humidity after a storm. Let's assume it's a communicable agent, says Mara, and let's assume we're exposed. What do we do? Quarantine, I say. But my mouth is dry and the word sounds insincere. Tommy laughs, but stops halfway through. Seriously, suggests? You want us to hole up in your house and wait for it to pass? If we're already infected, I say, then it doesn't matter. If not, then isolation is our only defense. Unless it's not a virus, says Tony. Unless it's something else. Mara looks at him, and for the first time, I see her uncertainty. What else would it be? She asks. Tony shrugs, but his mouth is a straight line. Doesn't matter, I say. If the adults are compromised, it's up to us. Mara folds her arms. We need to observe, monitor systems, document everything. I nod and begin to copy the structure of the table onto a clean sheet. I note the date, their names, the baseline behaviors. I will record every anomaly, every deviation, because if there is a pattern, it will be here, somewhere, in the accumulation of data. The ticking clock in the kitchen marks out seconds with the precision of a metronome. The kettle does not boil. The house is sealed up tight, but the air feels electrified, a charge building without discharge. Then, from the direction of the porch, a heavy, deliberate thump against the front door. All of us freeze. The room has no cover, no exits, except the way we came. There's a second thump, softer this time, as if a visitor is not certain they want to be let in. Jeff makes to stand, and Mara holds up a hand, palm down, and he sits again, his body tense like a trap, ready to spring. The third knock is the same as the first, measured, precise, inhumanly patient. Not answering that, I say. Nobody argues. The thumping stops for a minute. There is nothing but a whine of the fridge and a tick of the clock. Then, from the window, the red pulse of the tower intensifies, painting the walls of the room with a deepening blood hue, as if the house itself is signaling some internal alarm. Outside, the door remains closed, but I sense the pressure building inside. We are a closed system, 5 vectors of potential catastrophe, waiting for the next system to present. I resume taking notes, my handwriting steadier now, each letter a defense against forgetting. The kettle remains cold. The red light pulses on. The next phase has already begun. Damn. Well, that was great. My note still stands about kind of the end. It gets almost maybe a little too scientific-y, and they begin to not sound like kids to me or like teenagers even. And so I think with just a few little lines of maybe like Tommy or some of the others sounding like kids more or something else, you could kind of cut up some of that dialogue so it just seems a little bit more like believable. But overall, it's an amazing begin to a story. It's an amazing start. I love the simple mystery of he's dead and then them going to warn everybody and everybody just being these like mindless zombies who can't process the 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 situation, and then them pretty quickly coming to the realization that like, oh, like something's wrong with all the adults, and whether it's a disease or I'm hoping somebody mentions poison later, because I do think that maybe there's a murderer going on and they did something like to the water of the town, or it's a small group of people, so it seems like it would be pretty easy to whatever um to not like brainwash them all, but maybe because it could be something with the radio tower or whatever. But it does seem like it would be easy enough for a group of people or one person to like poison the whole town to where they can't react, or something like that. So I do think that that's still an option. But then also it's almost seems supernatural at the end with this knocking and this light, the light of the tower like shining brighter and like ramping up, like it's keying in on the house. So it almost seems like there's a lot that could be going on, and it really the end does a really good job of really opening the door to all of that, of being like, well, not only is there a murder, we're just going to say murder at this point. Well, not only is there a murder and all the adults are in on it, but now it seems like there's like a either supernatural or whatever insidious virus that's affecting the whole town, that's making people incapable of deviating from their routines, which is awesome. And I think that's like it's such like a mild take on like zombies. It's not the sense of like, oh, they're crazed and they're fleshy, and they're gonna eat you, but instead it's just like zombies to where they're stuck in their routines and they can't do anything different than what they would normally do. And they like, they'll, if you talk to them, they'll respond to you, but it's like they almost just say nothing. They almost say just what they would always say if you were like, "Hey, how's the day going?" And they'd be like, "Well, not too bad." I think that's cool, and I think that's such an interesting like phenomena, I guess, for the story to have on the back of this murder mystery, that I'm fully in. I love it. I think, we here. As I say, always comment, always upvote. We need part 2, please. And I also don't know if we got our narrator's name, but and that's would be my other big note, is that we do need a name. But this is great. This is like this yeah, for real. Thanks. Not only thank you Boots for recommending this one, but what a good example of a story that like is so strong that it does need to be finished. Like this story needs to, because I believe the person's done a really good job of setting up the world, the characters, and we really, and it seems like not only with this infection within the town, the zombification of the town, um, and this murder, but it really does seem like everything's going somewhere. And I am kind of curious to learn more of like our main characters, at least his childhood backstory, like what happened to his father. Are they like 18, 17? Is that how old they are, or are they like, 13? Cuz I think that would make a big difference, but I also do think that they're on the cusp of adulthood. That's what I got by the end with all that scientific talk, but um and we still don't know like what are they doing on this island besides being like wards of whatever, like this summer program or whatever it's called. I don't know. Um Besides doing that, and then like what were they going out to the radio tower for? Like we don't know those very simple kind of things. Like we don't know what they were planning on doing that day when they found the body. And I think that is kind of a key to letting us into maybe the psyche of this town before things started to go wrong. Because I think that is going to affect how things play out. So I definitely want to know all of those things. But yeah, what a great, amazing part one. Super fun. Really unique mystery. Just like such a classic like setup for a murder mystery in terms of like the locked in approach but on an island. And so like it's a fresh take on a really, common setup, but then to have this whole like neurovirus zombification of the whole town where no one can realize anything's wrong, that is just so cool and so much fun. I'm fully like, yeah, I love it. I'm Anna 404, Anna not found. My hat's off to you, ma'am. This was great. This was incredible. I need, as I said in my comment, we need part two. We need a conclusion ultimately, whether that can be done in just a second part or whether that's, multiple more parts. I don't know, but I really want to know where this story goes. This was killer. So thank you. All right. Devil's Den is what we're going to do next, but first I'm going to go to the bathroom. These are shorter parts from what I can tell. Well, maybe not that much shorter. I mean, it's part one's not going to be as long as the part one of the other stories, but this story has 25 parts and a finale. So, be aware that we're going to get into this story, but we're probably only going to get into maybe the first few parts, and then from there we'll kind of see. But yeah, Devil's Den by Howler of the Hills. I'm excited for it. It's a story that I've wanted to get into for a while now, but because it was just such a long multi-part series, I was just a little hesitant, but I think now is a good time. And it is completed though, which is nice. So if we read it, and if any of the viewers watching this, if you're really captivated by it, you can read the rest, and it's the whole thing's on Reddit for anyone to enjoy. So that's awesome. So up next we got Devil's Den Part 1, Howler in the Hills. Here I'm gonna play some Midwest Angelica and go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Honor.
Emergency.
I'm at 876 Pine Lane in Long Pine, right next to the church. And I can't really say for certain, but there's some kind of sacrifice going on.
Yes.
Okay, we'll be right there.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be right there. All right.
Okay.
It's a human sacrifice.
Yeah, people are throwing babies into a fire pit. All right, perfect. We'll head on over.
Babies in fire pit. Okay, and is this an emergency or is this just like a report you're making? Or?
If it was a real, I don't want to call it, they'd say, "What?
Huh?
Sir, you have to speak up.
Calm down.
So you can
calm
tell
down.
the guys,
we're going to be there. Just calm down.
What is happening? Hello? Speak up,
I need
sir.
you to be louder.
All right, Jerry, never
Do
mind.
not
Don't
hang
go.
up the phone.
Jerry, don't go. I'm talking to a goddamn whisperer here. Sir, speak up.
Did you fall away from the phone?
Yeah.
Follow the sound of my voice.
Yeah, sir.
Beep.
Sir.
Beep.
Have like an air horn. The cultists, they're coming near me.
Lead.
Uh-oh, pagan ritual mention. Hunty likes that.
There you go. It's right
Bingo
up,
card.
right up,
Get your bingo
right up
cards
your
out,
alley. There
bitches.
you go. Everyone get your
Love
cards
pagan
out.
rituals.
I'm gonna. You like to play bingo? You want to play bingo? I like bingo. My son Benjamin Goldblum. He loves bingo.
Officer Sam Page, Officer Andrew Webster. Okay, so the two officers are responding to sacrifices going on at the church. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's oops.
Do you like when people do the redacted thing on these videos?
It depends. I think it works here.
Okay.
Because we don't know what the other source is, right?
Okay.
Which I guess we're gonna find out. Depends on how much they redact.
Ray O'Connor? Are you in here, boy?
You, Ray? Is this in the Sistine Chapel? What kind of church is this?
It's a huge fucking church.
Super tall, yeah.
I think maybe it was just a warp lens that made it look weird. To my officer, Andrew
Maybe.
Webster.
Oh.
Nice little, a gift of the blood of an angel. Sick.
Let's go.
Phantom in its appearance, but inside churned with flesh and blood of the stars.
No.
The blessed walk in silence,
No.
blissfully closer to his sacred realm. Ascended beyond mortals,
Yes.
we have become obstacles of Azazel. Azazel? How do you say Azazel?
Apostles.
Azazel? Yeah, I meant to say apostles. I'm a fucking idiot.
Azazel.
Azazel.
All right. Devil's Den. And just like with the last story, I know nothing about this story yet. All I know is that it's, a long multi-part series, but I kind of gone into both these stories completely blind, which has been fun, which I go into every story blind, but like sometimes I get a quick kind of synopsis or something from the author that they're like, oh, this is my story. It's about, X, or sometimes in the title we get kind of a hint, as to what's going on. But I've kind of liked that both these stories, they just seem very open-ended and they seem like they could be about anything. It's kind of fun, All right. So Devil's Den, Part 1. We're going to read at least Part 1. I'm not going to commit to any more of that right now. Because I just figured out I have kind of a long day tomorrow. And I was already planning on streaming, so I wasn't going to not stream. But, so I might cut this story a little short. I might only give it like 1 or 2 parts, but that just means there's more for next time. That just means we can read more of it in the future if that's what we want to do. But anyways, Howler of the Hills. This was on CREEPCAST 7 months ago, so relatively speaking, it's somewhat of an older story, but I think it's enough parts that I'm like it might take somebody a while to read all these anyways, and so it was posted onto r/creepcast. I am curious if this author, have they posted anything else? Are they still posting on our are they now posting on r/tales from the creep? If not, maybe consider doing so. Maybe this story, maybe it could find some new readers over there, because things have changed since the story subreddit has started. And there's a lot of other cool subreddits popping up, like I mentioned, anxietypilled and stuff. So yeah. Devil's Den, Part 1. I've never been a skeptic. This is not a story about overcoming skepticism. I was raised on folk tales of monsters and myth. Through those tales, my father instilled within me a deep respect and love for supernatural. As a child, all I wanted was to witness the creatures, ghosts, and ghouls of his stories. It was an all-consuming passion, a single fixation that shaped every aspect of my childhood. I wanted my own stories to fill the minds of others. I was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And raised in a little town called Mountainburg. My mother died in labor, so it was up to my father and his family to raise me. For reasons that still elude me, my mother's family remained a mystery throughout my childhood. I only know that some distant relatives live on the Osage Reservation in Oklahoma, and that they chose not to be a part of my life. My father's parents had lived in Mountainburg their entire lives, so that's where he settled us. Mountainburg isn't much of a town to this day, but it was a beautiful place to grow up. Even as small as it is, there were plenty of other kids around. However, my obsession did cause problems in most social interactions. Some might describe my formative years as lonely, but I wouldn't. I had my family, and for a while that was plenty. Throughout my elementary school years, I tried to spend every free moment I had with my father. He worked as a park ranger with the state and had free access to some of the most beautiful places in Arkansas. His primary station was in Devil's Den, so that's where a lot of my childhood memories come from. For a long time, it was my favorite place in the entire world. I'm trying to zoom in as much as I can. He always had something new and exciting for us to do every visit. I realize now that I'm older. That a lot of it had to do with what section of the park he was sent to patrol. Even still, I got to hike every trail there was, catch some of the finest fish of my life in Lee Creek, and see what most visitors never get the opportunity to. The view from atop the fire towers left an indelible mark on my memory, one I'll always cherish. Without a doubt, those experiences etched themselves in my heart as some of the greatest I would ever know. My father wasn't supposed to, but frequently did bring me along for overnight watches. I didn't understand at the time, but the shortage of personnel to man them afforded me a rare experience. I would sit up with him for as long as I could, watching the sunset meld into the starry skies with him. That's when he shared with me many of the stories I cherished so much. He would tell me tales spun by the first settlers of the land and by the men and women he worked alongside. They amazed me, but not a single one so much as the stories he told about the Ozark Howler. The creature could have been right beneath us those nights, and so I was captivated immediately. I used to tell him that one day I would be the one to capture proof it existed. It was my whole life's ambition. When other children would talk about growing up to be doctors or police officers, I would be laughed at for my dream. Even the teachers and counselor would try to push me to be more realistic. I wish it had been that simple. When I was 10, I finally made a real genuine friend. His name was Leroy, and his family bought the house next door to my grandparents. The day they moved in, I was watching with excitement, waiting to see if they had a kid my age. I raced over the moment I saw Leroy and introduced myself. It must have been some kind of shock to the whole family. I think Leroy's parents were apprehensive about me at first. They were the first black family to move into the town, as far as I was aware, being that they likely grew up with parents that told them stories of integration and the hardships of the civil rights era. It's not hard to understand why now. At the time, though, I couldn't have cared less. Their skin color was the least of my concerns. Eventually, Leroy's parents told him to go play with me while they unpacked. I led him over to my grandparents' yard where they had a tree swing we could take turns on. He was shy, quietly thanking me for the offer as I started in with my whole obsessive diatribe. I don't even think how he looked really registered with me. Behind his oversized glasses was just another boy like me. My introduction flew by so fast, I'm not even sure I gave my name, since I was way more interested to see if Leroy was a big fan of spooky things as me. To that end, he instantly found himself my best friend, and when he perked up at the story of the Howler, I was halfway through the tale when he interrupted me to clarify that it lived in the area. He got real excited when he asked if I'd ever seen one, even more when I told him I wanted to be the first person to catch one. Before we both got called back to our respective homes that night, we made a pact to catch the Howler together. It was the start of the only real friendship I've had in my life. Well, that's sad. From that moment forward, we were inseparable. We walked together to and from school and spent every second we had free out in the woods hunting for our quarry. His parents had their concerns at first, but after meeting my father and learning about his career, they softened to our antics. Eventually, they were letting Leroy go with us to the state park on day trips. He even got to go camping with me in my backyard a few times. We took every opportunity to use these experiences to track and study the Howler too. So far my initial thoughts are this is a very sweet like childhood story. They want to catch the Howler. He's got a friend. I'm already worried that this is going to lead to Leroy dying and being killed by the Howler, which I'm like, God damn it, you know? So that bums me out, worrying about that. But I think so far, it's a very touching, like, beginning to a novel, beginning to a novella, whatever you want to call it. Because it is such a long multi-part story. I imagine it's got to have a lot of twists and turns. But the premise, the beginning seems kind of simple. I do wonder, in a 25-part story, are they going to be chasing the Howler the whole time? Yeah, maybe as they grow up over years, but I'm like, are they going to be chasing that Howler the whole time? Or is this just going to be maybe more about the mysteries that they uncover about Devil's Den in general, and like the spooky things that appear, whether it be the Howler, whether it be, all sorts of things, whether it be maybe there's, they're in Arkansas. So I am a little worried that the first black family moving into town, that they're going to have to combat some racism and some other things too. So, yeah, I'm thinking, the fact that this is a 25-part story, I'm like, I don't know if they can just be hunting the Howler the whole time. That might get a little stale, but we'll see. I mean, so far I think it's a good start, and again, it's kind of a coming of age sort of a thing, and I'm getting that same vibe. I didn't mean to do it, but I am seeing the similarities between these two stories already. And yeah, and it's also giving very The Shower vibes. How the kid's like fascinating with stories, and wants to catch the Howler, but also wants to also wants to kind of create his own stories and be in his own stories, as well as like just tell popular stories, be a storyteller. So I'm seeing all the what's it called, the similarities between some of the other past stories. It's also giving me some Caver Gang vibes too, I think. Yeah, it's very good. I'm intrigued. It has piqued my intrigue, as Hunter would say. Look at this little monster that jumped on my lap. Oh, Stella, let go of my shirt. Say hi. Say hi. I got a haircut. Say, yeah, I got a haircut. Can you see? Can you see? Here, get up on the table. I got a haircut. We shaved her. We had to trim her down. We had to trim her down. We left the hair on her head long though. Oh, say hi. Say hi. She just wants to lay on my lap. She doesn't want to be on camera. All right, back to 2. Okay. Check. Can you still hear me? Cool. All right. Yeah, 26 parts is a lot for sure. Props to the author if he manages to keep pacing consistent. Yes, cute kitty moment for sure. And that's kind of my main thing when I see a story this long, is like, I'm like, yeah, could they keep pacing consistent? They could, and it could just be a really good long mystery with a lot of twists and turns. But the fact that they're kind of setting up this Howler, I'm wondering, like, okay, is this Howler just going to be a thing in part 1? or in the early parts of the story, or, you know, is this story going to take place over their whole friendship, their whole kind of life, adolescent lives in Mountain, whatever it's called, Mountainburg or whatever. We'll see, you know, and that's kind of that's my hesitation with getting into stories like this is like, well, do I have to get to part 17 before I even finish one story, so to speak, before I even get the gist of anything? Or is each part, like with the Stairs in the Woods, each part is going to contain like a lot of different little gems? I'm hoping it's like Stairs in the Woods, you know, but we'll see. But that's just what I encourage people to, you know, that's the art of writing short stories, is that, you know, I think a lot of people, they listen to the podcast or they listen to whatever, and they just kind of assume that they're gonna write a left-right game or whatever, and they may do that. They may write the next Mother Horse Eyes or left-right game or Baraska or whatever. But I think it's just as admirable and cool if you can write a really good single part, whatever, short story. Or if you can write a multi-part, but each part has so many little good hits of cool. Like Stairs in the Woods is great for that. The pacing, I mean, how many cool, memorable moments are there just in that one story alone? Yeah, and I do too. I hope it branches into a bigger story other than just the Howler. I think that's a good point, Rude Dude. And that's kind of what I was saying with like, oh, they might have to combat some racism. They might have to like, I am kind of hoping that it just becomes about Devil's Den in general and the many different oddities of this sort of place. Yeah, we got to have faith in the author, and we haven't lost faith. You know, we're not saying that. I think it's just important to kind of bring these things up so that authors can be aware if they're going to write these multi-part odysseys. You know what I mean? If they're going to write these long things, they need to be aware of stuff like this, because ultimately one of the main things about like creepypasta and online horror is that you can have a multi-part, but like people are going to want moments in each part. They're not going to want to have to read to 4 parts to get to one cool moment. You know what I mean? And that's kind of, I guess, my point in reiterating all this or saying all of it. All right. Study the Howler too. We were the weird kids at school, but it didn't matter to us. We were never really bullied, but the other children did sort of ostracize us for our hobby. We were made fun of for using a history report assignment to present our findings about the Howler. However, we did get an A for the assignment from all of our diligent research on the legends and lore. Years passed, and my father eventually came to be great friends with Leroy's parents. They would join us for barbecues on the weekends. They started going to church with us, and they even came to Devil's Den a few times with us as well. They trusted my father enough that they ultimately wound up agreeing to let Leroy go on a weekend camping trip with us. We were 13 at the time, and we couldn't have been more excited for the opportunity for a whole weekend of howler hunting. We packed up into my dad's truck and went to the park. He took us deep into the forest, way out further than most visitors would stay. We pitched our tents to the far north of the park, near enough to Lee Creek to do some fishing. We were so far out that we never saw another person the whole day. My father had some work to do and gave us permission to do some exploring on our own. Huh, that seems responsible. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but okay. It's important to note that this wasn't reckless of him. He was insistent on following the rules for our own safety, and I wasn't unfamiliar with the area. He was never outside of walkie-talkie range either, and we had a good set to keep in contact with him. He just trusted us to be good boys. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better, but I still don't know about that. He wasn't wrong to trust us either, as we never went out farther than we were allowed. We hunted around for signs of the howler for the whole day and were right within sight of camp when my father returned. He called us over for dinner, and we spent the rest of the evening fishing and stargazing before heading back to the tents to sleep. We were excited for his help hunting the howler the following day, so Leroy and I didn't even try to stay up late. We must have fallen asleep early because I remember being groggy when I woke up again. Leroy was shaking me and quickly shushed me when I tried to ask what was going on. It was so dark that I couldn't make out anything within the tent, but I almost immediately realized what had gotten him so worked up. There was a noise coming from just outside the clearing we had made camp within. It was subtle at first, just enough movement in the brush to be noticeable. It would have been easy to excuse, except that there was no other noise at all. The insects and animals had all gone quiet, leaving only an oppressive stillness in the night. I knew well what that meant. The only thing I vividly remember more than anything else was the sheer dread that filled me as I began to recognize another sound. It was faint at first, but I eventually honed in on it. It was the sound of extremely labored breathing. It was controlled, but it distinctly reminded me of how some of the hikers I see would exhaust themselves and suck in air like it was running out. There was a desperation about it that almost made it sound like an excited animal, too. Those two incongruences couldn't settle in my mind. So, stop trying to eat me. You're a little howler, aren't you? Yes, you are. He's trying to eat me. Those two incongruences couldn't settle in my mind. Whatever it was, I knew it wasn't a man and it wasn't an animal. Abject terror struck me so hard that all I could do was pull the sleeping bag up over my head and curl myself into the tightest little ball I could, hoping against hope to stifle my tears. My mind screamed at me over and over that it was the howler. The last thing I remember was the sound of the tent ripping open slowly as if a knife was being pulled through it. I don't know if I passed out or simply fell back asleep, but I know I didn't open my eyes again until the morning. My father woke me up screaming Leroy's name. I pulled the sleeping bag open and found the tent open to the blinding daylight. Leroy and his sleeping bag were gone. Oh my God. Of course I don't know. Leroy better survive. That's all I gotta say. Okay. But to the story's credit, I was worried that it was going to take multiple parts to get going, but it's getting going in part 1. We're going. But his sleeping bag was gone too. That kind of leads me to believe that maybe Leroy ran away because he was scared of the howler. My father was frantic, searching around camp. I remember going out to him and asking where my friend was, but he only looked at me with tears streaming down his face. He stared for a long time at me. and he pulled his walkie from his belt and brought it up to his mouth. He hesitated for a long time before he queued it up and called for help. The rest of that weekend is a blur for me. I remember the other rangers arriving and one of them taking me out of the forest to the visitor center. My grandparents were there waiting for me and took me home. Leroy's parents arrived as we were leaving, and they screamed things that I still can't recall at us. I just remember my grandfather telling my grandmother to get in the car. I missed school that following Monday so I could speak to the police. My father and grandparents had to speak with them as well. They asked me a lot of questions about my father. Most of them I now realize were about any racist tendencies he may have had. That was the first taste of what I would deal with in the coming weeks. My grandparents pulled me out of school the second time another kid picked a fight with me. They tried their best to homeschool me, but were ill-equipped with their lack of education to do so. My father wasn't really able to be around to pick up the slack. I know now what he was going through, but it just seemed like he disappeared at the time. By the second week, my grandparents had reached out to extended family and convinced a second cousin of my father to take me in. They drove me into Fayetteville and put me on a plane to Texas not long after. I couldn't understand any of it at the time and fell into a deep depression for a long while. It only got worse when I came back to Van Buren for my father's civil trial later that year. It was the first time I had seen him since I left Arkansas, and he looked terrible. His eyes were swollen and his face had become gaunt. Leroy's parents were there, having instigated the suit, and refused to look at me the entire time I was there. By then, I had realized Leroy was gone, so I wasn't surprised, just sad. I returned to Texas and started therapy after that. I went on to high school. I graduated high school and went on to study forestry at Stephen F. Austin. Despite everything, I never lost my deep love of nature, but any dreams I had of following in my father's footsteps as a ranger were gone. I achieved my master's and went on to work for the state in East Texas. I tried to put the past behind me, but struggled every day. Therapy never really helped. I could accept that Leroy was gone and that my father would never really be normal again. I knew no one could ever be normal again, and that any relationships before he went missing were gone forever. I just couldn't accept the unknown aspects of it. No matter how many times I've been told there are logical explanations, I can't accept them. I still have nightmares about that night. I'll go to sleep and wake up in the tent again with Leroy shaking me awake. He doesn't shush me though, and it's not so dark that I can't see him. He looks at me with sad eyes and begs me to find him. He asks me over and over again, but I can't find my voice to respond. My therapist tells me I need closure. I'm uncertain if any can be found. However, I called in all my vacation time and made my plans. I packed my bags in my truck and prepared to do whatever it took to see them through. I decided, despite the illogical nature of it all, that I was going back to Mountainburg and to Devil's Den. That's a banger kind of beginning, I think. Because what I thought was going to be a long story about him, growing up with Leroy and them hunting the howler, it really, again, instead evolves into, okay, missing boy. His father gets charged in a civil trial. I'm guessing for the parents are either saying he did something to Leroy or for him being negligent, and saying, that he let Leroy get taken or whatever, whatever that is. But so our narrator kind of has twofold, like maybe he wants to find Leroy to kind of like prove his father's innocence, but he also believed he heard that night, he heard the creepy breathing and the knife like ripping open the tent or whatever. So it does seem like something like something definitely happened, and it could have very well been the Howler. So I really like that now he's sort of on the, I can see why this story is maybe so many parts now, because he's kind of on this odyssey to either find Leroy's body, prove his father's innocence, bring closure to Leroy's family, all of the above, find his best friend. The dude hasn't been able to have a best friend since. So I kind of like that in the first part of the story, we kind of get this defining childhood moment, and then he grows up, and in the end, or at the beginning of part 2, we're going to get like, he's a man now and he's trying to face this, and we can see what happens. Maybe this is going to evolve into some like crazy mystery where he's going to realize that kids have been going missing in Devil's Den for longer than he realized, and maybe it's the Howler, or maybe it's something else, we don't know. Maybe there's a creepy, child abuser, whatever, like caveman up in the mountains that's like, there could be so many explanations, that's the problem, is it's the unknown, and he does need closure. So it's really, this story is going to be kind of a quest for closure. And that I'm in for it. I think it's very interesting. I think the beginning I maybe was a little skeptical, not of the story in general, but just of the whole, like, I love stories. I want to be a great storyteller. It just, to me, it reminded me a lot of like that Showers character. And I was just going to be like, oh, so this person just goes looking for something that they shouldn't go looking for. And, maybe somebody gets hurt or whatever, but, they don't really reap they reap what they sowed, kind of a thing. And it's kind of that idea of, there are some things better left unknown. But it seems like more this is just a story of like childhood, or in the beginning at least, it's a story of like childhood, like whimsy and friendship, and that just getting totally disrupted by a horrible tragedy, whether that's a supernatural tragedy or not, we don't know. And so now, because of that, this person really can't move on. And so to see that trauma kind of affect them, and then now them come back to Devil's Den to finally face it, that is compelling. I'm interested, and I like the whole like Leroy already went missing, and it ruined both his life and his father's life. So he whereas in the other story you could have blamed them for like, well, why'd you go out to the woods with Leroy, which hindsight's 2020, but I do think like at this point he really doesn't have anything else to lose. So I'm fully whereas in other stories you're like, for the guy in the shower story, you're like, why would he go looking for the showers? Or some of these other stories where you're like, just leave, just, whatever. In this story, it really kind of makes sense. And there is a good motivation for our main character to really get to the bottom of this, whether that's just finding out what happened to Leroy, finding the Howler, uncovering some greater conspiracy involving Devil's Den. We don't know. But I think it's set up in such a way that I'm really bought in. You know, I'm fully down. So I you know, now that I've read part 1, I encourage everybody to go check out more parts of Devil's Den. This is just a part 1. There's a lot. This seems like it could be a really, it was a great part 1, but it seems like it could be a really awesome supernatural or, you know, just horror story about a child going missing in kind of a missing 411 sort of way. And part 2 starts with like him returning to Mountainburg. So, you know, I think that is kind of like the pacing from everything that happened in part 1. I think we see that the pacing of this story is really kind of spot on. And it's gonna do its job well of unraveling the different elements of this story, you know. So I'm excited. Let's see, it's 2:41. How long have I been streaming for? 2 hours and 42 minutes. Yeah. I did maybe want to read part 2 today, but I think I'm going to call it today because then I can start my next stream with part 2 and maybe I can convince some, after some people have listened to part 1, you know, it might convince some people to just go read some more parts of it themselves. So, I'm going to, that's going to do it for today, or for this week's Red Death Mask stream. Please go check out Devil's Den as well as the Radio Tower. Devil's Den by Howler of the Hills, and the Radio Tower by 404 and a Not Found. Show these stories some love. One's unfinished. We need an end. Thanks, Rude Dude. I appreciate you. I appreciate you always being here and being in the chat. Yeah, so go, you know, go support these authors, because one story's great, had a great part 1, but it's not finished yet, and the other is a 26-part story. I mean, that is freaking so amazing that this person just could even write so much, but then just put it all on Reddit for people to just check out for free. It's so awesome and deserves a lot of support. So go, you know, follow these profiles on Reddit. You know, you can search Howler of the Hills and you can follow them. And that's something that I love about Reddit, is that you can just follow profiles specifically, and I don't think enough people do it. So go, you know, follow them, upvote their stories, you know, comment on their stories, do all the things. And we will start the next stream with part 2 of Devil's Den. So now we have something to look forward to for next time, which is always a good thing. And there are a lot of parts to this, so that's what's exciting about starting a new series like this, is we really get to you know, we get to fall in love with like all new characters and an all new setting and story. And so far it seems like it's going to be really fun, and it's going to be kind of a Stairs in the Woods-esque you know, setup, where we've got kind of a spooky area in Arkansas where we know at least one really bad thing happened. We don't know what else yet, but So I'm excited. So thank you guys so much. Thank you to everybody who posted on CREEPCAST or Tales from the Creeps. Any author who's out there writing for the love of the game and because they love telling stories. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm here to read your stories, and I just wanted to say thank you because it's always a treat coming and finding these new stories and getting captivated is awesome, and it's a joy and it's a highlight of my life. So you have Howler of the Hills, 404, and a Not Found, and everybody else whose stories I've read. You have made my life better, and you have enriched my life through your stories, and it means a lot. I think means more than anyone could really realize. These stories are just a highlight of my life, so and of my week, and I enjoy coming and reading and talking to you guys about them. So thank you so much. I'm gonna go to bed because I got a big day of family 4th of July kind of stuff tomorrow. I know it's not 4th of July yet, but we're celebrating a little early, so I got a lot of stuff to do tomorrow. So thank you guys. Sorry to cut the stream off a little short, but I do appreciate everyone, and please, go follow the authors, upvote their stories, comment, and if you want to like and subscribe to my channel as well, I'd appreciate it. Till next time, friends and fiends, this has been another Red Death Mask stream. Adios.